Donald Trump needs to be removed from the office he is illegally inhabiting. It's just common sense. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. That is what Donald Trump said when asked about why he blamed the deadly crash that happened under his watch on DEI. He said, sense. There is so much lunacy, so much chaos, so much distraction, so much destruction going on already in less than 12 days of this illegal administration that we damn well need to get back to common sense. I want to go through thinking about numbers as I was starting the show today. And by the way, thank you for your patience as I got started today. I was actually not feeling quite well this week and wasn't entirely sure that I was going to be able to do the show at all, but I'm so grateful to be here with you tonight. I was just thinking about some numbers as I thought about the common sense and the real common sense that we need to hone in on and act on right now before more damage is done. Let's just go through some numbers. It's been over 20 years since we've had a crash, a deadly crash like this in the United States of America. And in just under 12 days, 64 civilians have died under Donald Trump's watch, under the watch of a newly appointed Department of Defense head and Secretary of Transportation head whose primary qualifications are being Fox News anchors. That is their only qualification for the job. There was no Federal Aviation Administration head when this crash occurred. So 64 civilians as a result have now died under Donald Trump's watch. Let's put the image of some of them up on the screen. God bless these people on that plane. Also, 3 service members who have just recently, 2 of them been identified, Ryan Austin O'Hara and that Staff Sergeant Ryan Austin O'Hara and Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Lloyd Eves, excuse me. They're currently withholding the name of a 3rd female who is believed to be the pilot, a female pilot with about 500 hours of flying experience. It should be noted that at this stage, Donald J. Trump has attempted to pin blame on the pilot of this plane, has attempted to pin blame on our U.S. military officers. Now, those are some numbers: 64 civilians, 3 service members who have died. I do not forget the 346 people who died in a plane crash in 2019. I don't know if you all remember this, but this is when that 737 MAX went down. Remember, it was the second major crash of a Boeing 737 MAX. Now, this one happened in 2019, right in the wake of Donald Trump's tantrum shutdown. Remember that tantrum government shutdown he had with his face-off with Nancy Pelosi when the Democrats had just taken back control of Congress, and he wanted to just pound his chest and go out there and he was a big boy, and so he shut down the whole federal government. And there's so many effects and consequences of that he didn't recognize right off the bat, other than putting federal workers and federal services out of operation. But one of the things that happened was the needed update that was supposed to happen to the 737 MAX did not happen because of FAA closures under Donald Trump's tantrum shutdown. As a result, a second 737 MAX Boeing went down. That Ethiopia Airlines crashed, killing 346 people. I will never forget that. It's one of the earliest, deadliest consequences of Donald Trump's administration and actions that I recall. And when this crash happened, a lot of things, I got to be honest with you, a lot of things came to mind. But let us remember that this is a man who was telling everybody that there was so much chaos in the world, so much war, so much destruction, and he was going to bring back peace and order. If you ever believe that for a second, I sure as hell am sorry for you. He is someone who thrives on chaos, thrives on destruction, on distraction, and everything, absolutely everything must be met and viewed through that lens. Let's go through some more numbers. Number 11. This is the number of federal holidays that the workforce of our Defense Intelligence Agency will no longer be able to celebrate and embrace. Here's a letter that went out to the Defense Intelligence Administration. I'm gonna pull it up for myself just so I can read it. It's unbelievable what they are telling people at our federal agencies. They're saying that the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, will pause all activities and events related to agency special emphasis programs effective immediately and until further notice. Additionally, special observances hosted throughout the year by the command element, directorates, and special offices are also paused. These include observations related to the following. You ready? Martin Luther King Jr. birthday, Black History Month, Women's History Month, Holocaust Day, Days of Remembrance, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, Pride, Juneteenth, Women's Equality Day, National Hispanic Heritage Month, National Disability Employment Awareness Month, National American Indian Heritage Month. Talk about trying to erase history, trying to erase the diversity, the understanding, the history and awareness of this country, what we need to function and be able to grow and not revert to oppression and injustice. My God Almighty, can we look and acknowledge the signs of authoritarianism and fascism taking place and understand it is not time to mitigate them. It is not time to score points politically. You know, if you're watching Lights On, that I have patience, zero patience for any Democrat right now trying to take credit for pushing back on Donald Trump when they abdicated that duty on January 6th, 2025, by not objecting to his electors, by not stopping this illegal presidency before it even started. I'm going to have a few ideas before the end of the show about how these Democrats can just begin to regain a sliver of credibility. But if they think that they're going to ever regain power or win an election again with this course of action and this treading lightly. I mean, they might have some nice hot takes in hearings, but it's going to take so much more than that. It's going to take bold action. It's going to take thinking outside of the box. It's going to be take shredding that rule book that they continue to live by when the other side has literally put it up in flames, and actually doing something to save this country now before it's too late. I'm also going to share with you, but when I get through my list of numbers here, some really important perspective from history. Yes, I'm talking about 1930s Germany because we damn well have the signs, we have the record to be able to understand where we are and to take action to prevent what's happening from happening. But here's just a couple more numbers to go down my list. 1,500, of course, that's the number. Over 1,500 pardons and clemency were granted to violent January 6th insurrectionists that went against federal law enforcement, the people who keep us safe. 1,500 pardons and clemency to these individuals. Let's get back to the theme I started with, common sense. You think it might be common sense to take some action against an illegal president who pardons violent criminals and allows them back into our streets to wreak havoc or do his violent bidding, because we always know he puts people out there to do his dirty work. He doesn't want to do himself. So let's get back to some common sense about the consequences for some actions like this. You know, talking about insurrection, I can't help but thinking about the flip side of this, about thinking about some people right now around the world who are doing the right thing, who know how to handle illegal actions like this. And one thing that I'm constantly thinking of in the last few months, especially, is South Korea. How South Korea uh, immediately impeached their president when he tried to invoke martial law to basically distract from a domestic political crisis that he was having. And you have to understand this as a tactic that authoritarians and authoritarian wannabes use. They create crises or they exploit real crises. They either exploit real crises or create new ones. And that's actually in this book, In on Tyranny. There's a whole chapter about how terrorism is either exploited or created and used by authoritarians to overreach and abuse their power. But the South Korean president tried that, and God bless those South Korean people and the opposition who actually had the teeth, the spine to do something about it immediately. Right now, as we speak, Donald J. Trump supposedly, but quite illegitimately and illegally, is the so-called leader of the free world, a man who committed insurrection in this country, who led a deadly insurrection against a peaceful transfer of power. That man is supposedly the leader of the free world, supposedly wielding these unthinkable levers of power. Look at South Korea. Their president right now sitting in a jail cell. They wasted no time. They impeached him immediately. They charged him with insurrection. They put him behind bars. That is where Donald Trump belongs. He belongs behind bars, not in the Oval Office. For God's sake, what is wrong with us? Can we get back to some common sense? This week, we had a little bit of justice. For God's sakes, what's wrong with us? Senator Menendez, rightfully corrupt Democratic congressman, charged with all kinds of chicanery with his friends in Egypt, bribery, corruption, sentenced to 11 years in jail. Absolutely the way it should be. Donald Trump given an unconditional discharge for 34 felony counts. His charges for crimes against democracy and stealing national security secrets thrown out the window. As a result, the Department of Justice has had a purge in the first 12 days of his presidency. Prosecutors that were tied to his prosecutions have been purged from the agency. Federal law enforcement is experiencing a purge at the FBI. Here's another number for you, about half a dozen. That's the number of top FBI officials that were told to resign or be fired as Donald Trump has continued his federal purge, his attempt to purge people in public service who are doing the work to keep our country safe. I'm reading a little bit from an NBC article by Ken Delanian and Tom Winter and Zoe Richards. It says several top FBI executives promoted by former director Chris Wray were told Thursday to resign or retire or they would be fired, according to multiple current and former Bureau officials. The purge of senior officials includes about a half dozen executive assistant directors who are some of the Bureau's top managers overseeing criminal, national security, and cyber investigations. They are civil servants, meaning they can't be fired without cause. This is just one. Spencer Evans, the special agent in charge of the FBI's Las Vegas office, said in a note obtained by NBC News, informed by FBI HQ today that the executive leadership at the DOJ plans to dismiss me from the roles of the FBI, along with several other FBI executives, as soon as Monday morning. I was given no rationale for this decision, which, as you might imagine, has come to as a shock. Another FBI official that was purged from his role was David Sundberg, the assistant director in charge of the FBI Washington field office. He is the highest ranking field agent so far to be fired from the FBI in Trump's second term. He's been there since 2002. These are individuals who are heavily involved in Jack Smith's investigation of Trump. And this comes amid a broader slate of firings across the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Extremely, extremely dangerous, the assault that's going on of law enforcement right now. And then what do you have? You have the spectacle that we don't, I like the way Steve Colbert opened his show last night. I don't know if any of you saw it, but he opened it with basically the sense like, this is not new. We all knew this was coming. We all experienced this the first time. It's kind of disgusting that we have to experience all this again. And that's why, to me, the hot takes, the clickbait about all of the insane maneuvers is so tired and really, quite frankly, insulting. I hope you're as insulted by it as I am, to think that we would just be grabbed by these, attempts to get our attention without actually giving us any mechanism to fight back or actually undermining our efforts to fight back, frankly. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. Um, but, Stephen Colbert was just kinda out of patience, and, you know, God bless him for having the ability to turn a situation like this or finding comedy in this. But it's so sick. None of us all of us knew all this was coming. We warned the country about it. We knew all of this was what was going to come, and we had a legal mechanism to stop it. There has been a lot of reporting this week, I've seen it already, about how, oh, the Gallup polling shows that Donald Trump's approval rating is the lowest for any new president in history, or any new president in X amount of years. His approval rating is so low, and oh, look at how many Americans are really against him. Are they really just now discovering that that's really the case? Maybe the Democrats discovered that on January 6th when they had the opportunity to have a spine and not capitulate to violence in advance or think that, angry mobs were going to storm the Capitol if they upheld their legal authority, but instead gaslit their supporters and defended abdicating the Constitution by calling it peaceful transfer of power, a peaceful transfer of power to an insurrectionist. Maybe they could have not acknowledged on January 6th that less than 50, even according to the numbers as they stand, which I think are highly dubious, even according to the numbers that we have reported, less than half of the electorate voted for Donald Trump. Less than a third of eligible voting adults voted for Donald J. Trump. This is not somebody who has a mandate. This is not somebody who has mass support among the American electorate. So it's not any news flash that the country is not for him. And maybe, just maybe, they could take that and now, right now, before things get so much worse, take some really bold and creative actions to stop this before more damage is done. I wanna put up a image of, a few pages. I'm not gonna put up every single one because I frankly don't have the bandwidth in this platform to upload every one, but I'll read through them for you of, a post on Instagram from what's they call themselves a Right Wing Watch, of course, a play on Right Wing Watch, but speaking of Hitler, Right Wing Watch. This was posted by Leslie Jones, and I'm just gonna read through this to you, through this for you as as a warning, as an indication of just the serious situation we're in and how, my God, how it mirrors what we're dealing with right now. It says in 1923, Adolf Hitler incited an insurrection against the German government. He was tried, given a slap on the wrist, and became a convicted felon. Despite being treated charitably by the judge, Hitler claimed the trial was political persecution and successfully portrayed himself as a victim of the corrupt social democrats. Sound familiar? Hitler cleverly positioned himself as the voice of the common man, railing against the elite's cultural degeneracy and the establishment who we all labeled Marxist. He claimed the education system was indoctrinating children to hate Germany and promised to return Germany to greatness. To solidify his base, Hitler masterfully good in minorities for the nation's problems, exploiting societal divisions with an us versus them narrative. Many Germans took the bait. Hitler's Nazi party continued to gain traction until he became chancellor in 1933. Now, I don't have to tell you how this resonates, how this parallels what we're seeing with the attacks on DEI, with the attacks on migrants in this country right now, the deportation of, first of all, warrantless raids, ICE raids that are sweeping up American citizens and veterans. Second of all, while their so-called predicate is to arrest violent undocumented workers, they're sweeping up those without criminal records, literally deporting these people to Guantanamo Bay, which is a human rights violation in and of itself, a place that should have never existed, frankly, under any administration. And I I blame the Democrats as much for that as anyone. Guantanamo Bay should have been closed years ago. And they're now deporting non-violent, undocumented immigrants to Guantanamo Bay, putting them on half empty, if not mostly empty, military aircraft, gross waste of American taxpayer dollars, and sending them to Guantanamo Bay. I'll continue this slide. Hitler appointed German oligarchs as his economic advisors. Sound familiar there? Proceeded to privatize government-run utilities, solidifying support of the economic elite. With the working class divided among cultural and ethnic lines, the Nazis shut down workers' unions and abolished strikes. Progressive and trade unions were imprisoned and sent to concentration camps. Corporate profits skyrocketed, while the working class Germans lived paycheck to paycheck. Now let's just take a minute to talk about what Trump is going to do tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow, those much loved tariffs are going to come into effect. 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico starting on Saturday. He has reiterated that these tariffs will take effect, also 10% tariff on China. Of course, what you must understand about tariffs on other countries and is they affect the price of goods in our country. The prices are going to increase exorbitantly. You thought inflation was bad under Joe Biden, who was trying to mitigate a global inflation epidemic. Well, the prices are about to go way up thanks to Donald Trump, thanks to Elon Musk, who warned us as he was most likely hacking the election for Trump. He warned us that the hardship was coming. I also appreciated Jimmy Kimmel last night reminding us all that Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, made a 20-some million settlement with Donald Trump over his suspension from Facebook in the wake of January 6th. 20-some million dollars. Just blackmail into paying off Donald Trump to get in his good graces when his administration took power again. I mean, this is the sick situation that we're in. So it might just be common sense to pull out every stop to end it, to stop the harm that's going to hit and that already is hitting so many of the American people. Just to continue through that slide, it talks about how Hitler became a billionaire while in office. Before I end the show today, I'm going to give you the outline that I did not fully flesh out last week about why Donald Trump should already be being impeached right now and already be on track to be removed from office. And the number one from that outline is his emoluments violations. And you think about how much this man, through his cryptocurrency, through his media company, in the first administration, we acted like we still had guardrails, like the emoluments clause still meant something. And it's like with this administration, we have just taken it at face value that Donald Trump can violate every single law and get away with it. And he is enriching the hell out of himself. So this is about Hitler. It says he became a billionaire while in office. He knew he and his clan of oligarchs could get away with the scam if they constantly had an enemy within to blame, while the corporatocracy, there we go, robbed the country blind. Easy target, was one of the smallest minorities. He removed the birthright citizen rights of Jews. Sound familiar? Started rounding them up for mass deportations for being illegal in the country. German press under Nazi rule highlighted instances of violence by Jews to convince the public that Jewish migrants were a danger to real Germans. And this is exactly what Donald Trump does with the illegal migrants who have committed violent crimes in this country. And this is what the Fox Newses of the world and everybody who amplifies this. I lived in this fear back when I was in this brainwashed echo chamber, because they take these small instances, they make you think that they're everything that's going on. They blow them out of proportion, when the fact of the matter is that illegal migrants, illegal immigrants, or undocumented immigrants in this country commit crimes on a much, much lower scale than American citizens. So do they commit violent crimes? Are they atrocious? And do they exist? Sure. Are they on par or out of proportion to the crimes committed by actual American citizens, not at all. So that's, just right on par with what Hitler did, blowing things out of proportion. Says he wasted no time dismantling democratic institutions. Loyalty wasn't just encouraged, it was demanded. Opponents were silenced, media that dared to question him were vilified as the enemy. His propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, bragged about how the Nazis were able to intimidate the media into giving them favorable coverage and didn't need to give direct orders. We've had some examples of that already. We had that ABC settlement before Donald Trump took office. We've had Midas touch going against pouring cold water on the very mechanism that we had to keep this dangerous man out of office from in the first place. You know, think some of these people are your allies. I just want to put this up on the screen because I don't want to let this go unwatched. And I think sometimes when I speak out of Midas touch about Midas touch, in retrospect, I don't think I've been hard enough because I really think that the way that they have used their audience and made them think that they're part of something when what they're doing is not helping at all. And a lot of times they're siphoning so much money from these people while enriching themselves exponentially. If you knew how much money these people were making over their clickbait, it is not doing you any good. It would kind of make you sick to your stomach. But this is just a one example of how they poured cold water on our attempts to hold Congress accountable and demand that Congress do their constitutional duty to keep Donald Trump out of the White House. There were posts removed from their Reddit thread about 14th Now, which was, of course, the historic demonstration that we had in Washington, D.C., to try to pressure Congress to have a public showing of resistance to this man illegally assuming the presidency. And we all know, you're familiar with this back and forth, how Midas Touch did a hit job on my reporting without ever naming me. That's how little these men are. They could never actually say my name, but they did a hit job on my reporting, claiming that the actual lawyers that went on my show were not lawyers, claiming that I was a lawyer wannabe or doing things for clickbait, which is so incredibly rich. I mean, they have truly learned the art of projection from covering Donald Trump all these years. And we're literally working against our efforts to save democracy, literally working against them. And I was having a conversation with a friend of our movement, um, and I said, I've been so hard on Midas Touch because I have personal experience. I know what they are on the back end. I know the disingenuousness because I saw it firsthand. And when I saw their unwillingness to cover the very issues that could have saved us all from this, when they purport to be these pro-democracy champions, and frankly have all of these creators under their umbrella that have so much talent of their own that they don't need Midas Touch. I mean, I hope some of their creators are listening because, I mean, they have some very talented people that would frankly be quite all right on their own, and they have allowed themselves to be sucked in to this Midas Touch vacuum that then controls their messaging and in some cases controls their profit, which is a crying shame. But I have been particularly hard on Midas Touch because I know personally things, and I know much more than I have ever said to you. But I really do think that we have to examine the whole kind of oligarchy of so-called pro-democracy media that is out there, because Midas Touch isn't the only one who has not been willing to have the tough conversations, who has poured cold water, who has, I mean, we all understand this. Like, we are the narrative creators. We are putting out there what is possible and what actions need to be taken. And if you have all of them, to a certain degree, it was, Brian Tyler Cohen. He had Glenn Kirshner on his show. They had conversations where Glenn was very, very clear after first coming on my show about why the 14th Amendment should be enforced. But so much cold water was poured on the notion that our Constitution could actually be upheld It was made to be framed as such an impossibility. Um, and they continue to do this as Donald Trump, this illegal president, and his clown show of a cabinet, dangerous people. Kash Patel, for God's sakes, is about to become the FBI director. As these people wreak absolute havoc and tear up our institutions, they pour cold water on the actual legal mechanisms that we have to stop this, to keep our republic, to not turn into Germany in the 30s. Uh, uh, Listen, I I have no ill will against any of these people, not even against Midas Touch. I just, truth is golden, so I can't help but speak the truth about them. But for God's sakes, if any of you are going to be part of saving this country and not destroying it, and I include anybody out there with a massive platform, podcasting platform, anyone else, stop saying that the actions that will save us are never going to happen. Stop saying that our Constitution or thinking that the rule of law could actually be enforced is magical thinking. Stop trying to undermine people who are actually putting themselves out on the line with actual data and law and science to stop our country from descending into fascism. Like, grow a spine already. And if you're telling your audience you're pro democracy, for God's sakes, be pro democracy. Or, you know, at least if you're their audience, stop buying into it and don't waste your energy, your time, or your money. Because it is, frankly, as I said a couple months ago in a post I put on Blue Sky, somebody said to me, we shouldn't be attacking our own side. They're not on our side. If you are for saving this country, if you are for getting Donald Trump, the illegal president, out of our office before he does so much more damage, before those numbers that I listed go way up, so many more people die, so many people's families are deported, so many more federal workers are out of jobs and terrified, then watch where you're putting your attention, your time, and your money, please, and hold these people accountable. And frankly, what they're doing when they, and it all makes sense because they have a lot of friends in the Democratic establishment and they all come on their shows and, they promote each other, they cover each other. It all makes a lot of sense when you think about it, that they wouldn't want to really hold each other's feet to the fire. Think about how dangerous that cover is, letting them get away when they abdicate their responsibility in the most dire way. Extremely, extremely dangerous. This is lights on. We will not be doing that here. I wanted to, I've had a lot of people share with me letters that they have gotten back from representatives in response to why they didn't take action on January 6th. And I was going to share just one of them just to address kind of the straw man arguments and the spineless arguments that have been made. This is the end of a letter to one constituent as to why she did not raise an objection on January 6th. This is from Susan Bonamici. I think she's a representative out of Oregon. And she wrote back to her constituents, Donald Trump, 312 electoral college votes and 77 million total votes in the 2024 election. We won't question the numbers right now. Even though he played an instrumental role in inciting a riot on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, although Congress has the authority, here she is acknowledging they had the authority to prohibit Trump from holding office, we did not have the votes necessary to do so. I am extremely concerned about what that means for the future of our country and democracy. That being said, Congress also has the responsibility to uphold the will of the people by honoring the results of a free and fair election. Wow, a lot to address there. Free and fair, hundreds of bomb threats in Democratic precincts, Elon Musk buying an election, if not hacking it. I think it's far from free and fair. Have you heard of any constituents who have reported their voting records disappearing or their ballots just never being reported being counted? A lot of questions to whether it was free and fair, but to say you didn't have the votes necessary. These people, if you watch Lights On, you know the math. You know it would have only taken one fifth of the body, so only 87 members of the House and 20 members of the Senate to raise an objection could have easily been constituted by Democrats. They did not need to enact new legislation. They did not need two-thirds vote to make Donald Trump disqualified. He is disqualified. They need two-thirds vote to remove that disqualification. For them to say, to try to dance around this issue, talk about honoring a so-called peaceful transfer of power in a free and fair election, and not upholding their duty to the 14th Amendment, which prohibits them from certifying the votes of a man who was constitutionally disqualified. It's unforgivable, unforgivable. And one thought that I had, and I've had this conversation with some people very close to me, and they say, "Jessica, impeachment? Are you serious? Impeachment? Look what impeachment did last time." But if, in my mind, if Democrats had any credibility, or they want any credibility right now moving forward, they want to regain any credibility, they need to be speaking every single day about why Donald Trump is not qualified and why he should be impeached and removed from that office. He should not be there. It's common sense. Look at the actions he has taken. Look at the things that he has been allowed to get away with. Look at where he belongs in prison, like that South Korean president, like former Senator Menendez. Here's another comparison for you. You know how he mocked the disabled this week? How he mocked DEI and was talking specifically in that sick press conference. He was talking about the mentally ill or people who are paralyzed and how the FAA was trying to recruit people. He was literally suggesting that the FAA was recruiting people without the physical or mental capacity to be air traffic controllers. That's what he was insinuating. Never mind that the fact of the matter is that the FAA recruitment was the same throughout his first administration, dating back to like 2013. This FAA recruitment policy never changed. This was not some special DEI program under President Biden. Not to mention, it was never meant to include air traffic controllers. There's specific language that existed then and exists now about FAA hiring air traffic controllers that had the capacity to have that job. So they would not be hiring people who are physically or mentally incapable of holding that job. But look at how the sickness of this man, and it is complete projection. You know, the amount of time that he is thinking about mental illness tells you just how much mental illness he is dealing with within himself. But he went on to attack the disabled. This wasn't just his typical, racist DEI attack. This was a specific attack on the disabled in this country. And I couldn't help but thinking back to that first reason why everyone, and I include myself in this, should have entirely written him off 10 years ago when he mocked that disabled reporter. That should have been the last straw for every single one of us. We never needed to pass that juncture. Mocking that disabled reporter in that press conference, and many, many Americans, including myself, and I have no pleasure in this. I can give you the twisted, brainwashed reasons why, and it's because of the propaganda. It's because of the Russian and Nazi-like propaganda of Fox News that I was so misled into being able to support him after something like that, because the deflection onto the others was so strong. But that's where it started, and we should never forget that. You know that this week, I'm going to find the story. I can read it to you. This week, a 19-year-old TikToker was arrested for mocking a disabled, for doing a dance above a disabled person in a TikTok video. Literally arrested for it. 19-year-old. You think about the small things that people are arrested for in this country, and you think about the unbelievable crimes that this man has committed. He's being allowed to stay in that Oval Office to issue illegal executive order after illegal executive order, to come out in the wake of a deadly plane crash, have this blasphemous moment of silence. I thought about playing the clip, and I decided I'm not gonna put this man on my show at all, but he literally, of course, in probably something that was pre-written for him, said, "Let's have a moment of silence," closed his eyes, and in the middle of the moment of silence, because this is who he really is, opened them to look around the room, see what people were doing, and then closed them. And then had the gall to say he acknowledged these souls who died when then he went on to blame the disabled, to attack the Army, who he is supposed to be the commander in chief for, the Army pilots who were manning that Black Hawk helicopter, and then making these obscene attacks on disabled people in our country. Someone, a 19-year-old, was arrested literally this week for obscene attacks on disabled people. Not physical, not actual harm, just gestures. Some perspective for you. So, might just be common sense to take this man down with every legal avenue that we have, with every now is the time for boldness and imagination and creativity like we have never had before. It's not gonna cut it. Your, you know, representatives who have found newfound stardom and being like, the Democratic stars of Congress. I'm talking about you, Jasmine Crockett, like coming out and saying, "Oh, look, everybody, look at the damage Donald Trump has done in 12 days." Sorry, my friend, it's not gonna cut it. Where were you on January 6th? What are you doing now to rip up the rule book that they've already ripped up and get back to the laws that you have abandoned? You damn well better think of some creative ways to do it now, because this all is already your legacy. This is all your legacy. I saw a email come through for in my email from Austin Weatherford, and he was, someone who I was in contact with during the Harris campaign, because I offered my support to him as a former Trump staffer who understood how dangerous this man was, and he still sends me his emails, and, he sent me an email this week saying that him and Olivia Troy and a number of other former Republicans were in at the Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard hearings this week, and he rightfully pointed out how obscene they were, how there has to be so much more pushback, and the reporting that I've seen so far seems to suggest that this wholly disqualified, incredulous, dangerous, retributive, unqualified person, Kash Patel, is headed for confirmation. It's insane. But Austin sent out this email saying this is going to be Republicans' like, because obviously it's really the Republicans that they need to siphon off to not confirm him. But I will remind every Democrat sitting in that body, it is every single one of their legacies. Yash Patel goes in, it's your legacy. Tulsi Gabbard, Russian asset, goes in, it's your legacy. Fox News host Sean Duffy and Pete Sexual as the head of the Department of Transportation and Defense, Democrats, that's your legacy, because you have opportunity to stop it. And instead, you wrote these straw man argument emails to your constituents about why you couldn't do the job that we hired you to do, that our money pays for you to do. So here's one other thing. I just want to put this up on the screen. If you haven't heard about it yet, Trump has signed an executive order to try to deport anti-genocide protesters, to revoke their visas. This would affect a lot of students who are in this country legally. Again, this is something that authoritarians try to do. They try to frame pro-justice peaceful demonstrations as in the frame of terrorism. This one is under the guise of anti-Semitism. It's been a few weeks since I spoke about Israel and Gaza, and I want to put in a few words for it today, because it's unthinkable. It's truly unthinkable what has happened in Gaza under the American dime, with the American sanction, with the sanction of President Joe Biden. It's so tragic. It is so utterly tragic that President Biden didn't use his leverage, use the financial leverage that this country had to stop a genocide from happening under his watch, and that we have allowed this sick, twisted perversion of so-called anti-Semitism or, defending the Jewish people or Israeli people to justify a genocide. It is such a gross insult to the actual Holocaust victims, to the actual victims of genocide, that we would use their pain to justify this unthinkable pain on another people. And if you've been watching Lights On for months, you know that early on, I wasn't even highlighting pro-Palestinian voices in this conversation. I wasn't highlighting Islamic or Muslim voices, even though they are valid and they absolutely deserve to be heard. I was highlighting Israeli and Jewish voices against this genocide because I had no patience for this recasting of a search for justice and a condemnation of genocide as anti-Semitism. And that is what Donald Trump is now doing, trying to cast students who are legally in this country as anti-Semites for protesting a genocide. The same man who just this week early on said they need to clear out Gaza, trying to force Palestinians into neighboring countries and keep them from returning to their own. And he's going to try to deport these legal students in our country and revoke their visas. Just one more example of the sick, illegal executive order that Donald Trump is trying to push through. So I promised you I would end this show with calls to action, and I mentioned a few minutes ago impeachment and how this conversation may seem like it's not going anywhere, like the numbers aren't there, like there's no path forward. I don't know that this is the path forward, but I know that everybody and anybody who has any real commitment to our democracy and the future and salvation of our country and everything that has been sacrificed for it needs to think of every legal avenue for stopping this now and get damn creative about doing it. I'm going to put back up on the screen the impeachment campaign that I put up last week. This is from Free Speech for People. You know, we've had John Bonifaz on the show. John Bonifaz is the president of Free Speech for People, and they've launched this campaign the day that Donald Trump took office, and they had cause on day one, as I mentioned earlier, from his emoluments violations. And they have updated as the dates have gone on. They have updated their impeachment campaign with new violations and new reasons for this man to be impeached and removed. Now, why am I talking about impeachment? Well, because it is the legal mechanism that we have to remove a corrupt, dangerous, unfit criminal from our White House. Should he be there in the first place? Absolutely not. Does the 14th Amendment forbid him from holding that office? Yes, it does. It absolutely does. But I just want to go through a few of the reasons why Free Speech for People has given for impeaching him already. And some of these you may not have even heard of in the campaign of mass distraction, which, by the way, is a term that I used about 2 years ago for Midas Touch, promoting one of my first videos for them. And now Ben Mycelis has started to use that term quite frequently, mass distraction. It was a weapon of mass distraction, a term that I introduced to him, as other things have been introduced to him that he now uses exclusively on his network. Not really exclusively, I'm just giving an example here. But let me go down this list of some of the things, just some of the things that are grounds for impeaching Donald Trump already. Number one, violations of the emoluments clause. Free Speech for People talks about how Trump has refused to sell his ownership stake in companies through which he is assured to receive substantial payments from foreign governments in violation of the Foreign Emoluments Clause. At least 5 foreign governments pay a combined $2 million per month in fees for their units in Trump World Tower. And because all 5 of these foreign governments are currently paying Trump these monthly fees, Trump is in violation of the Foreign Emoluments Clause from the moment he took the oath of office. Number 2, unlawful, unconstitutional, and corrupt conduct during the 2024 presidential campaign. And then he talks about the violation of campaign finance laws, which I spoke about months ago with Crew when they were demanding investigation into Donald Trump's meetings with oil executives and his promise to them if they provided him $1 billion in contributions to his campaign. They list other things in these unconstitutional and unlawful campaigning activities, including using racist and xenophobic rhetoric, referring to immigrants in Aurora, Colorado as bloodthirsty criminals, threatening physical violence against political opponents, the U.S. military commander, journalists, protesters, spreading dangerous disinformation about U.S. hurricane disaster response. Wow, we forget about all these things. There's just so much. And then they talk about abuse of the pardon power. This, of course, lists all the obscene pardons of the January 6th insurrectionists. They talk about the attempt to unconstitutionally strip U.S. citizens of their citizenship. We talked about this last week, how a federal judge shot down Donald Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship in this country. You must have heard this week about all the firing of inspectors general. That is another grounds for impeachment. You know, there's a law that Donald Trump has to notify Congress 30 days notice if he's going to fire IGs. And I didn't hear a single remedy this week as I heard discussions about all of these illegal firings without proper notice of all of these inspectors general that are there to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse from occurring. Everybody, acknowledged that he just blew past the requirement to notify Congress with 30 days notice. Nobody had a remedy. Well, it's grounds for impeachment according to Free Speech for People. He has number 6, abused his power to seek retribution against perceived adversaries. It talks about all the unlawful firing of attorneys involved in the Trump investigations and prosecutions, those firings of all of those DOJ officials we mentioned earlier in the show. He talks about they talk about the persecution of retired General Mark Milley by removing his security details and threatening to go after him. They talk about the abuse, number 7, abuse of emergency powers to declare an emergency, declaring a national emergency to justify deployment of troops at the U.S. border. They say it constitutes a serious abuse of his power. By declaring a national emergency, Trump is able to bypass the rule of law and gain access to powers not normally afforded to the president, powers he is already abusing by ordering the deployment of U.S. military forces to the southern border to support the activities of the Secretary of Homeland Security. They talk about number 8, unconstitutionally usurping local and state authority. He has attempted to unconstitutionally commandeer local and state authority to carry out his mass deportation plans by threatening state and local officials with criminal prosecution if they decline to be co-opted by federal immigration authorities. Under the 10th Amendment, states retain, quote, every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled. In blatant disregard for this amendment, on the second day of his administration, Trump's then acting deputy attorney general issued a memorandum stating that the supremacy and other authorities require state and local actors to comply with the executive branch's enforcement initiatives. Neither the supremacy clause nor the federal law empower Trump or any federal agency to commandeer local or state enforcement resources or to determine whether or not states apply scant resources to federal projects, especially when those projects cut against the state's own priorities. So he's unconstitutionally interfering with state and local authorities. There is a lot going on almost every moment of this presidency is basis for Donald Trump's impeachment and removal, not to mention foundationally, he is illegally occupying that office. He is fundamentally, constitutionally not allowed to be there, not allowed to issue a single order, a single executive order, a single appointment, a single action that affects any American citizen. He is not allowed to take under the Constitution of the United States. So we better start getting extremely bold, creative. This is not the time for shyness. This is not the time for continuing a profit model based on clickbait that gets us lots of money. And, you know, God almighty, it's so sick when we think about what has gotten us here and the people who have failed us up until this moment and what they could have done to keep this sickness from going on. But I want to just thank, as I usually do, thank all of you for your incredible support. Thank you for your support of this program and for subscribing. We're growing here on Lights On. I want to remind you, if you haven't already, the best way to support a platform like this, and frankly, to get other people, we are what I said last week in playing that clip from an interview I did. I said, we are what happens, and I truly believe that. We set the narrative. Every one of us has so much more power than we realize to influence our surroundings, to influence our country, to influence the world. What we see has an impact, what we do has an impact. So if you're all in with this fight to not lay down, to stand out, to do the tough things, you can support this program just by subscribing. Please subscribe to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel that you're watching this on right now. Thank you for all of your support that you send to me all the time. As I mentioned, I repeat this, I get so many messages and comments. If I don't respond to you specifically, please know that I'm seeing you. I appreciate you, that you're the reason that I'm here, especially on a week like this when I didn't even think I was physically necessarily going to be able to come before you on camera tonight. So I want to thank you so much for that. And I want to remind you of a sentiment I shared last week, and that is that in spite of the disgust that I feel, the just absolute lack of patience for what got us here, I feel a great sense of freedom and empowerment because of the work that I and all of you have been doing with me in this movement. Being on the side of truth and the side of freedom is incredibly empowering and freeing. And I want to encourage each and every one of you, to the extent that you can, to be fearless, to maintain that fearlessness, and to live in the moment. If they have made you afraid, they have already won. So please do not give them that. Please claim your freedom, claim your stand in that light, and claim all of the benefits that come with that. And I really do believe that as we each do that individually, I'm not saying I know exactly how this is going to work out. I'm not saying I know exactly the way out, but I know that if we start from the right standpoint, if we stand with truth, stand in the light, don't allow ourselves to be intimidated or threatened or made to be afraid in the darkest of times, then we can shine a light that is so bright that it can't help but extinguish this darkness. And it starts with each and every one of us. So I really, really encourage you to stand with me in the light. Thank you so much for doing it already, because I know you do. So again, subscribe please to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. If you want to support my efforts specifically, you can do it at thejessicadenson.com or thejessicadenson.com/donate. You will see on the thejessicadenson.com site the way that you can buy Lights On merch to support this show. I'm going to hopefully soon also get this going on the audio podcast, but for now, I am 100% the producer, the performer, the everything for Lights On. So I'm just managing all of this on my own. And as soon as I can, I'm going to get it going on an audio podcast too, which it obviously used to be. And a lot of you would like to watch it there. But in the meantime, the best way you can share and support is by subscribing on YouTube to the Jessica Denson channel and sharing it with as many people as you know. Thank you so much, everybody, for being with me tonight. Thank you for being with me always. Thank you for standing and loving this country so much, for caring enough to not let democracy die on your watch. That makes you incredibly powerful. As always, my friends, let your light shine.